Well, I hope everyone having a great Sunday. It is my day off, and so I'm kicking it. I'm enjoying my day off, and I thought that I would attempt something. So the other night, though, I was in a Discord. I was in the ACA Discord, and I was having some of the people there, some of the atheists there, trying to help me with this particular challenge because, I like to have my arguments tested. I like to see, if there's holes, if I can short things up, I can word things differently. And we ran it a couple times, and each time it kind of come out to be the same, it seems. And I haven't seen any invalid structure yet. Okay, so I'm assuming so far this argument is holding up as far as being able to label a square of opposition, like I have in my paper, using just two axioms. And the two axioms are taken straight from Matt Dillahunty's beliefs, right? So I could have three axioms, but I really don't want this to be an axiom because this is not what it's derived from. But it's under the structure is under the I guess foundational underpinnings that some atheists hold the null position, right? As atheism is a null position, right? You hear it, ubiquitously, right? Atheism is the null position. They're absolutely wrong on that. Matt Dillahunty has said, the null. I've heard him say atheism is the null position, and then he has actually said just recently in a tweet, "quote Atheism is." He said, "The null position is a belief that God does not exist," which is interesting. No God exists is what his exact words were. No God exists, which I thought was kind of interesting, because in that particular case, that's what you hold true to see if you can do an experiment to reject the null. And so his version of atheism is not no God exists. His version of atheism is that no God, he doesn't believe that God exists. It's a lack belief. So it's odd that he's putting out there that they're not, the no position is all of a sudden now no God exists. Because when people say atheism exists, atheism is the null, they're saying that no God exists is the default position, which clearly doesn't hold, right? I mean, that makes no sense. In fact, the null can only be something if it's propositional. You have to be able to reject something as false, assuming it's true, to show that your explanation is more likely than the null. That's pretty much what you're doing in statistical inferences, right? And for an experiment, you say, hey, I'm going to hold this assumption to be the case, and I'm going to do an experiment, and then based upon my findings, my data, my p-value, I can say, okay, it is more likely that my explanation is a higher significant statistical difference or inference to say that I would accept that, and I'm going to reject the null. I'm going to reject the true premise that I assumed was true as being true, right? Sorry, Suzanne. I'm going to get past this. I'm going to simplify this. I really am. So stick around. I just want to get that out there with the null hypothesis, right? So this is another framework that atheism is in the null hypothesis kind of thing. But he says atheism is defined as does not believe God exists. Nonthiesm equals atheism. So what I wanted to do was basically, actually, I shouldn't have gotten the whole null thing. That was actually for something else I was working on. But I wanted to get that out there anyways. But because we might get into that in the future thing. I might even write a blog entry on it. But yeah, that's not really required, I guess, for this particular argument, now that I think about it. Yeah, so let's just stick with the two axioms. So the first axiom is atheism is defined as God does not exist, or excuse me, as does not believe a God exists, right? And I am doing that more prescriptively. I'm not just describing it as like a generality. I'm saying that for the sake of this, I am prescriptively assuming it to be, yes, this is what it's defined to be. Okay, but I'm going to tell you ahead of time, that's going to have to go by the wayside at some point. If you prescribe this usage, if you say this is the prescribed usage, then this doesn't work for the atheist. It just completely falls apart even faster than what I'm trying to show people. So you're going to have to see eventually that it is only descriptive. But let's assume prescriptive right off the bat. And then second, non-theism equals theism, right? Okay, so Matt Dillahunty has always said there's only theism and atheism, right? So if you're not a theist, you're an atheist. So from those two axioms, let's see if we can derive a square of opposition. I'm going to briefly go over the square of opposition for you guys. Okay, so if you look at these funny little lines, what this is basically saying is there's four corners, and each corner is a categorical. You have all S are P, some S are P, some S are not P, or all S are not P, and some S are not P. Basically, hey, look, all dogs are mammals, but not all mammals are dogs, right? It's just categorical. These are showing relationships between the different categories. Okay, so the dark lines in the middle The single solitary dark lines with no arrows, the diagonals, are called contradictions. That means the two corners are contradictory of each other. Dog, not dog. Right? God exists, God does not exist. Believe God exists, does not believe God exists. Whatever you have as the object, you just negate it, and that gives you a direct contradiction. Right? Not dog, dog. So the top left and the bottom right corners are contradiction, and the top right, bottom left are contradictions. If one corner is true, the opposite corner is false, because they're contradictions. Kiwasa, right? They have to be false, right? As far as being a member of that element, right? If you're a member of the top left, you cannot be a member of the bottom right. They're mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive because they're a dichotomy. They're contradictions. You cannot both be a theist and a non-theist at the same time. And again, this is assuming rationality. We're not going to get into, bizarre mind states where you can hold conflicting beliefs. That does happen. It's called cognitive dissonance, or it can be a form of maybe a diatheism. But it says, what would you call someone with no knowledge of the concept of God, no information about the concept of God, never heard the proposition? That's considered to be called innocent. Innocent on the proposition. So those are the diagonals are. The top line is called a contrary. A contrary is where you have two things that both can be states that are true. Both can be true. One can be true. The other can be true, but both cannot be false. Okay. In other words, you have to be one or the other. Okay. On the bottom, on the subcontrary, is just the opposite. Both cannot be true, but both can be false. One can be true and the other can be true. Example would be Judaism and Christianity. Judaism is true, Christianity is false. If Christianity is false, then Judaism is true. They both can't be true, but they certainly both can be false. Right? So the top is contraries, the bottoms are subcontraries, the diagonals are contradictions, and on the sides you have what's called subalternations. These are just implicatures. There's no direct logical inference besides just implication. That just means by implication, if this is the case, then that. If you believe the sky is blue, you do not believe the sky is not blue. Right? So it's a simple implication. If you believe God exists, you do not believe God does not exist. If you believe God does not exist, then you don't believe God does exist. Excuse me. We'll work through this, but what we're going to do is we're going to start labeling these, and I want to see any atheist that can actually label these in a way that's coherent. That's my challenge to them. Label it in a way coherent based upon these two axioms. Because I was in Discord for hours the other night, and like I said, it almost always came up the same way. I think it came up every time. It came up the same way, just semantics, but it always showed exactly what it's trying to show. So we're gonna see if it holds. So let's start this off. Who wants to do this with me? Who wants to play with me? By the way, don't make that on the soundboard. I was not meant to be dirty. Who wants to play? Kawasa? I need one person to kind of be the key here. Who wants to play Atheist? Although you guys are all atheists still. Who wants to? Ozian. Maybe Ozian? You want to do it? Ozian talks? You guys find out. The first one who wants it is going to help me work on this. Do. None of you? Okay, April will play. Yes, I wanted her anyways. All right. So we're gonna do two things. One, we're gonna set a proposition. One, the proposition is going to be God exists, this is standard stuff, right? We've all been this a million times. The predicate is belief, right? Flamo, no, you're a theist. Remember? All right. So you have the belief predication, which is B. You have the proposition, which is P. So BP would be believes P. I don't need to go over this a million times because you've already seen it a billion times, right? Go look at the Venn diagram that Landon and I created. So it's pretty standard stuff, right? But I mean, if you want me to put them here for somebody who may not be familiar with the proposition, is exist and B equals belief. Okay. I hate MS Paint. Is there a way after you actually put it in there, you can't change it? You can't go back in MS Paint oh, maybe you can. Let's see here. Nope, you can't. Is that big enough? It doesn't matter. I want to, whatever. You should be able to see that just fine. So P is God exists, B believes. All right, so let's start off with, I will label these for you, and we'll start off there. So this would be a position of BP, all right? Actually, you know, we're going to start with here because we're starting with the second axiom. Would you agree that according to the second axiom, right, this would be the does not believe position if this is the believes God or believes God exists position? What implies the other? Would you agree with that? Yeah, I was going to say, so sorry. Yeah, as a polytheist too. Most of you guys are atheists out there. I'm sorry. Well, how do you want to label this, April? Where do you want to start these things at? I should probably, ask you where you want to start these things at. Yeah, oh shoot. Ah. I really haven't used paint in a long time, have I? I like the black and the white shows up easier. How do you make your brush bigger? There, marker. All right. So be down. Okay. So let's just start at the very. Well, what corner do you want to start on? Or do you want me to? Do you want to help you with this a little bit? Because I can tell you right now, certain things are just not going to work. But I mean, I'm assuming that the atheist who knows nothing about this is going to try different corners. But I want to walk it through where it actually works the first time. Because if you start putting things randomly and put like BP here, B not B here, it's never going to work because the converse doesn't hold. So they're going to find that on their own. But let's start off. Let's just start off right here, and we're going to say not BP. I can get to the right color. Not there you go. Not BP, and we're going to call that atheism. Actually, let me do it this way. Okay, this is according to the second axiom. Yeah, it doesn't matter where they start. It really doesn't, because again, if you start like with this on the top, it's just never going to work properly, right? Because there's no implication of not BP implying anything. It's always going to have to be as a sub-alternation. Okay, so this is according to the second axiom, right? Does not believe God exists. We're going to call that atheism. I mean, the first axiom. I'm sorry, the first axiom. So far, so good. So, if this is a contradiction on this side, on this diagonal, right? If this is contradiction, then we can say by double negation, not BP, this has to be what? April. Remember, a logical negation would be the negation of the contradiction. So not BP, we want to take the negation of that, which gives us a double negation, which in classical logic makes it go away, right? Makes it a positive. So it's left with just what? BP, correct? And we're going to call that position theism. Believes God exists. So far, so good? I don't think anybody's going to balk at that, right? Not B, not P. No, it's not B, not P, it's BP, right? God exists, right? The theist believes God exists, right? And so according to the first axiom there, right? The first axiom is atheism does not believe God exists, would be the diagonal. So you have a direct dichotomy, right? You have a direct relationship between theism and atheism here. And according to Matt Dillahunty, this is correct. This is exactly what Matt Dillahunty argues so far. Let me make this closer here. Would you all agree that this is so far is exactly what Matt Dillahunty is freaking arguing? And as stated so many damn times, it's ridiculous, which we all know he's wrong about. But this is going to show why he's actually wrong. Using logic, because logic's fun. All right, so that's correct. So far, you all agree? Everybody on board with that? Polytheist included? All right, so if this is BP, right, then the subalternation of that has to be well, actually, it's going to be complicated. Let me do it this way. On this side first, on atheism. If this is the subalternation, then up here, right, it would have to be B not P, meaning that you believe that God does not exist would imply that you do not believe God exists. If you believe God does not exist, that implies, by subalternation here, that you do not believe God exists. Would you agree? Yeah, LibreOffice probably is better than Paint. I agree, but this was just convenient to me. I haven't used LibreOffice Draw forever. But so far, let me know, if there's any mistakes. So far we have the diagonal of a contradiction, theism. The contradiction is atheism, according to Matt Dillahunty. You have the subalternation on this side. And by the way, it's called a semiotic square of opposition because it's not really a canonical one, but whatever. But if you believe there's no God, then of course you don't believe there is one, right? So if we take the direct logical negation of B not P on the diagonal here, what do we end up with? Right? Not B, not P. That's the logical negation. Right? So we've actually got the logic now of the square of opposition down. Right? Right? They're not B, not P, correct. So right now, all the things are labeled logically, correctly. If you can think of any other way to do it, please let me know. This is the challenge to the atheists as well. Now, you could use different variable. I mean, obviously, I've also used BS, G, BS not G, and that just, the G means God exists. The S means subject in that particular case, because I wanted indexical, meaning relating to a subject. But I wanted to simplify it for this demonstration, right? So when I'm just using general stuff, I just basically use BP. If I use more specific, that's indexical, I use BSG. That's just my convention. There's no rhyme or reason for it. I've just found it works for me to describe these to people when I'm using these types of terms to say, okay, I'm just using very simple, general, then I'm going to use this type of logic, okay, BP rather than BSG. All right, so far this is good. All right, here's where the fun part comes in, guys. According to axiom 1, now atheism is defined as God does not exist. Well, if that's the case, then how do we have an axiom? How do we have up here in the right-hand corner the belief that God does not exist? If that's not atheism, what is it? Now remember, Dr. Paul Draper makes a very astute note in SEP. He says that if atheism is defined as a lack of belief, it leaves strong atheism out of the cold in the rain. Okay, and what he means by this is that if atheism is, I do not believe God exists as a psychological state, you cannot incorporate a propositional state out of it, right? You can't derive a proposition from a psychological state. I do not believe is not something you derive any kind of proposition from. So it leaves strong atheism as not even a form of atheism. So people that believe there are no gods isn't a form of atheism. They are still atheists because they lack a belief, right? They still fall under atheists, but strong atheism is not really a category because that makes it propositional. You cannot have a proposition, no category, in a psychological category. There's a problem there, right? So we have to start changing things around a little bit. We have to think outside the box a little bit because we all would accept that anybody who believes there's no God is an atheist, I would believe, right? So let's not make that a prescriptive definition any longer. Let's have to change that, right? Because if not, then what do you have for this position here? What do you want to call this top corner here if you're not want to calling it an atheist, right? You can make up terms, you can make anything you want. But I would think Matt Dillahunty would even call the person who believes there are no God an atheist. Would he not? I mean, how are they not? I mean, that implies that they don't believe God exists, which would be, in that particular definition, somebody who believes, that doesn't believe that a God exists. So this label here still has to be atheism. It has to, I mean, there's really no other things it could be, right? I mean, if you believe there's no gods, you lack a belief, so you're an atheism. It is a subset, but the problem is it can't be a subset propositionally because propositions cannot be derived from a psychological state. But so far, okay, this is how Matt Dillahunty would probably, but he wouldn't define it this way, right? of course, you say, hey, look, B not P is atheism, and they say, no, it's not B but P. Okay, then what the hell do you want to call that position, B not P? What do you, if not atheism? If they're not an atheist and they believe there's no God, what the hell do you want to call them? See the problem that we're running into already, trying to make their schema work? It's riddled with issues. But are you guys okay with me calling that atheism? You don't have to prescribe it as some, but just, that corner needs a label, right? 50 Shades of Beach. Yeah, hey, welcome. Yeah, look, I got atheist friends. I got Satanist friends. I just talked to Lucien Greaves not too long ago from the Satanic Temple. I've known him for a very long time. I listen to satanic music when I was Mormon. So yeah, welcome. Everybody's welcome here. Or anybody who's not a dipshit piece of crap troll, but they don't come by this stuff. You notice the trolls don't come by when I do the philosophy stuff. It even bores them, right? It bores the trolls so bad they don't even bother. You can call them Matt. All right, so this leaves the bottom left-hand corner open right now, right? And we're going to get to that. So where it says atheism right here, okay? Where it says atheism right there, on the second premise there, right? It says not theism equals atheism. Do you agree that we can derive a negation of both and end up with theism equals not atheism? All you do is take a negation on both sides. So if you take a negation of both sides, you have not theism, which is theism, and you have not atheism. So theism is not atheism. And that would hold, right? If he wants to make them dichotomous like that, that would actually hold. Do you agree with that, guys? And how do I really got to find a better program than this. This does suck, I will admit. So, if you agree with that, then we can say that atheism is non-theism, right? Or theism is non-atheism. Either or, right? I mean, it works either way. So this is we're going to relabel this. We're going to call this non-theism. Okay? You guys agree with that? And that still holds, right? Theist, not theist, right? Right? I mean, there's no problem with that so far. It's part of our axioms. We can derive that from the second axiom by taking a negation of both sides. We can derive that theism is the negation of atheism. It's a direct contradiction. So if atheism is non-theism, we can just substitute, which we just did. Or we can take a negation of both sides and you end up with theism equals not atheism. So, like for example, up here I can put not atheism if I wanted. So this is where we end up with this. So, the contradiction of this, let me clear this one out. Here we go. So atheism, we're going to take the double negation of both sides. We're going to end up with theism equals not atheism. And I really wish I had a better freaking way to do this. This is so freaking hard. Because normally I just erase it, but I don't know how to make the eraser a different color because I don't use paint. April says fight Canadian. I was teasing earlier, yes, but I fully agree. Thank you, April. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope you're learning something here. So on the top here, since we had atheism there before, we're going to put this as non-theism. So on the right-hand side, both these are non-theism, which is correct, right? Both forms of atheism would be non-theist, correct? So there's nothing. So far, we're not changing anything weird, right? I mean, it's just by simple substitution and deductive reasoning that we can say the top is non-theist, because you can't believe in God and be a theist, right? So it's non-theism. Now for the fun part. If this is non-theism and I take a logical negation of non-theism, what do I end up with, guys? I'm gonna let you think this out. I'll give you a hint. It starts with a T. If I take non-theism and I take the logical negation for the contradictory, which is the diagonal, what do I end up with? Non goes away, and I end up with just, yes, you've got it, theism. So logically speaking, to be semantically consistent, right? This has to do with logical consistency. That position has to be theism. Wow. Yeah, in my paper, I call them strong and weak theism, but oh my God, Dustmeister 88, dude. You're a blast from the past, dude. How you been? So if we do that, then we can change this stuff back here. Okay, we're gonna go back to here. This is how this. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay. Back, here we go. What's a better program for this? You said Libra? I'm gonna have to use Libra next time. I'm not gonna go through this again. It sucks. There you go. All right, so we're gonna type this in here, and we're gonna put atheism again. Okay, so far so good. And then down here, we're gonna get rid of this. And this is all done by our first principles there, our axioms. Yes, I'm sure there's an easier way than this. I could just pretty much draw something over it. Whatever. Okay, so I go back to here and here. I'm going to call this atheism again. Okay, so now we constructed a square of opposition where both sides on the right-hand side logically follow that they're both atheism, which means on the left-hand side they're both theism. This is the basis for my WASP argument, the weak atheist special pleading argument. That if one side of the square of opposition is both of the subalterations are atheism, then the left-hand side they both are atheism. Therefore, theism, semantically, to be symmetrical, right, to be logically consistent in your system, semantically, both positions of believes God exists and does not believe God does not exist is considered theism. This is why you have weak theism and weak atheism in that particular thing, right? Because the right-hand side here, this bottom corner would be construed as weak atheism in a different schema, and the left would be weak theism, right? But in Matt's view, which is to make the square complete, this weak theism has to be considered theism to be syntactically complete. I don't use Photoshop. I have GIMP. I guess I could have used GIMP. Interesting, isn't it? Now, there's one other little thing that's kind of interesting. What happens if you're a person who does not hold to both top? Just to this, right? You don't hold to theism or atheism. Remember, subcontrary is the bottom, both of these positions, right? We saw in the outset, subcontraries do not both have to be true at the same time. You can be both false, meaning you don't accept the proposition true and you don't accept the proposition false, right? Well, if you don't accept the proposition true and you don't accept the proposition false, that's the conjunction of not B, not P, and not B, P. That's the conjunction of it. So if I have the conjunction of those two things, what position do I have? Anybody want to guess? Anybody want to guess? Come on, you can do this. Yes. What if I have the conjunction of those two things I've written down in numerous papers, and if you've seen my Venn, you would definitely know. But what is somebody who doesn't accept the proposition true and someone who doesn't accept the proposition false? Because Matt Dillahunty says this position doesn't exist. He says there's only theism and atheism. Guess what? Matt Dillahunty is wrong. Not just wrong, but logically, practically, just unbelievably wrong. In his view, he can basically say that there's only theism and atheism. But I'm showing you by using his schema, what happens? You're not syntactically complete using his schema, right? It's not semantically nor syntactically complete, I think, because clearly, if you want to use the square of opposition to show the relationships, I've derived the relationships from those two axioms to give you this. You call them an agnostic, correct? That is the agnostic position, the person who holds to both subcontraries, right? Interesting. Now, this is how my paper describes it. This is how it is in the literature. This is ubiquitous. Anywhere you go and read something on philosophy, this is what it would be, right? 50 Shades of Bitch. I'm not going to get into that right now, about why being an agnostic. But I mean, agnostic is somebody who doesn't believe either way. You don't believe P and you don't believe not P, right? Right. So let's get rid of these down here. Let's say, okay, I don't want to call these atheism. Okay, I don't want to, and now we are violating by the way, our axioms. Right now we're going to be violating our axioms because I want to get out of that because we've already shown axiomatically this is what it ends up with. But I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this. I'm just going to move this down because I don't like it. It's too high up. Get rid of all this stuff here. I'm going to type this over again. Okay, now I've gotten rid of these two labels here, right? I got rid of the two labels on the bottom. Why? Because I don't consider those actually positions in my. This is how my view would work. Does not believe God exists isn't sufficient to be atheism. Just like does not believe God does not exist is not sufficient to be theism. This is a coherent system. This is syntactically complete. This is semantically complete. I don't. This is normally how it is in philosophy, but I don't hold does not believe P as atheism, because if I do, then clearly it follows that not B, not P is theism. It follows, and I've proven this multiple times in my proofs, right? And if you want to have semantic completeness, then it would be called theism. But atheists go, no, theism must be the belief that God does not exist. Well, why? And it's no any different than saying atheism must be the belief that God doesn't exist. That's how it's held. But you're just throwing that out there as, oh, I want theism to be the positive case, but atheism is not the positive case. Well, you're just making shit up at that point. You're basically saying, I want this for that, but I'm not going to hold it for this. That's called special pleading. As literally special pleading. For you to say theism must be a belief, but atheism must be the lack of belief, you are special pleading. Because you're saying theism must be something and atheism cannot be that. Well, why not? That's how it's held almost everywhere in literature. I mean, would you literally tell an atheist that they don't believe, an atheist who believes there are no God, that they're not an atheist? No, of course not. But the sufficiency condition is that belief to make it sensical. Because if you don't hold any position, you don't hold any belief, right? If you're at the bottom here on the subcontraries, on these subalterations here, if you have these two positions, then you're an agnostic, right? You're not a theist nor an atheist. You don't hold either of the top positions. But if you want to say that you're a theist and a weak atheist or a weak theist, because normally, right, if you want to break it down, and again, I'm not big fans of these terms. I'm not using them, prescriptive. I'm just showing you, how it kind of generally goes. This is considered to be what's called weak atheism. Okay? And I think even Matt would probably agree upon that. I mean, and he just calls weak atheism atheist, which I think, again, is dishonest. But if you do that, then this, of course, would have to be weak theism. Oh. Change the color. Ozian Talks $5 says, Reverend Jedi Knight Ozian, thanks you for the paper. It entertained me for an hour and it was worth $5. You wait, what? Oh, the $5 for that. I was going to say, do you have to pay to read my paper? Wait, it's not a paywall. But thank you, Ozian. I appreciate this. Yes, very much so. But I was like, holy crap, did you have to? I have no paywall in my paper. And there's only little very minor stuff that I might change in my paper, but it's just comma, stuff like that. It's nothing of any consequence. But I don't know if I'm going to even bother. I'm sorry, it's been read 520 times, and my paper is in the 0.5% of all papers read on academia.edu right now. And there's a couple things I could have made clearer. Or one thing, because somebody asked a great question. They said, hey, how can agnosticism be true? In your paper, you have agnosticism is true. It should be clear by context, though. When I say agnosticism is true, I'm not using agnosticism as propositional. When I'm using it as you accept agnosticism, right? You accept the agnostic position. So if you look in the context of my paper, these are positions that you're accepting. If you accept the bottom position, BP, not BP and not B, not P, then you're accepting the agnostic position. That's what I mean by true, right? So you can't say agnosticism is true or false because agnosticism is not propositional. It's a psychological state. So in my paper, when I say agnosticism is true, I'm not referring to it as being the proposition of agnosticism being true. I'm referring to it as a state of being agnostic. That state is being true. And it's a very nuanced thing, and I get that. But if you read the context of the paper, that's the framework with it's in, right? So if it's true that you're a theist, it's true that you're an atheist, or it's true that you're an agnostic, right? That's the truth tables that I'm going by, right? You can only one of those could be true, right? Those are mutually exclusive and jointly exhaustive. So if you're a theist, you're a non-atheist, you're a non-agnostic. If you're an theist, So if you're an atheist, you're a non-theist and non-agnostic. If you're a theist, you're a non-agnostic, non-atheist. And if you're an agnostic, you're a non-atheist, non-theist, right? So say that 10 times fast. 500 reads and it's in the 0.5%. That's sad, almost 9 billion people. Well, it's just on their site, dude. This is how many people read papers on their site. So that's actually astronomically good. So of all the papers being read on that particular site within the last 30 days, that one's been in the 0.5 top percent of read. I think that's pretty damn good. Malik's paper was put out in 2018, and he only has 1,400. Well, I should say only, that's good. But he has 1,400 views. 1,400, and it's been out since 2018, and it's a great paper. It's called Atheism and Defining the Burden of Proof, I think, or something like that. So in 5 days, I've already have, a third of what he has in 5 days. Well, I'm not trying to like humble brag. Well, yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? I should brag about that. But the point is that it is being talked about. It is being read. But do you see here that the weak atheism on both sides, that agnostic is a weak atheist and a weak theist? I mean, it's proof. It's visual proof. You don't have to follow my logic on my blog or anything like that. You can visually see by the square of opposition that all people that hold the weak atheist as atheists are also agnostics and weak theism, semantically speaking. Right? This is why when you hold and you just say I'm a weak atheist and down here, I don't know what your beliefs are. I don't know what label you have. If you hold this position down here, you're one of two things. Right? If you're not BP, you're one of two positions. We know you can't be theism, right? Because that's negation. So the only other two opposites you have are atheist or agnostic. You're either up here, and this implies this by the subalternation, or you're agnostic and you hold to this and this. Those are your only two logical options. So when you say, you're a lack of belief atheist, it's ambiguous because you're not telling somebody whether you're an atheist that holds God exists or doesn't exist, or you're an agnostic in no position either way, because you've made the term so ambiguous by defining it in the weak case. So, how do you guys think of this challenge? Can you think that an atheist can label these things using BP and not BP, and label them such that you don't end up what we're ending up with right now? I haven't seen anybody be able to do it yet. I mean, there's nothing you can really, I don't see much you can do with the notation. I mean, because if you put like BP down here, you're just going to have the same thing, opposite over here, then the subalternation is going to go the other way. You're just going to have an upside down square of opposition, right? So no matter where you start that BP, you're just going to be an origin of reference. But the square is going to end up the same way every time. Whatever corner you pick, starting with BP, or any one of these, this is what you're going to end up with every single time. It's just going to be oriented differently, it looks like to me. Right? So if it's this way every single time and you start off, with BP, then but logically follows this corner's this, logically follows this corner's this, and then it logically follows this corner's this. So we start labeling stuff. Okay, well, with the axiom on the top said that atheism is does not believe God exists. So there has to be down here of atheism, right? This has to be bottom corner, has to be atheism by our first axiom. We can then say that that's actually non-theism by our second axiom, right? So theism, not theism. On the top part, because this is atheism, we can say that this is non-theism by the same thing. And if this is non-theism, then the negation, that has to be theism. So down here in the bottom left is theism. So on the right-hand side, you have atheism, atheism. On the left-hand side, you have theism, theism. And then you have the agnostic, who's both an atheist and a theist by using the weak and strong usages. This is what Grandpa Oppie has pointed out. This is what my blog has pointed out. This is what my paper has pointed out, that if you use weak atheist as your definition of atheism, you are, in fact, also a weak theist and an agnostic, logically speaking. You cannot get out from under that. A Flamo, $10 says, Steve McRae paper more popular than all Mr. Beast papers on Academia EDU. Mr. Beast has a paper on the Academia EDU? I'm not aware of that. This is making opt from an is. You kind of can, I think, on a hypothetical syllogism. You can't with a categorical syllogism. Ozian says, this matches my table on my video about belief in this propositions that a God exists or does not exist. A simple truth table gets you this. Yeah, no, it's, again, I've been trying to be very logically consistent, right? I mean, if you look at my Venn diagram, this flows from that very, very, very well, actually. Let me pull up my Venn. I really want an atheist to do this with me in real time that actually holds to lack of belief atheist, right? Because I want them to see in the real time, hey, you keep on talking about how you want to be logical, you want to be rational, but you're not. By following Matt Dillahunty and what he's been saying, you're not being rational. You're basically showing irrationality and groupthink and ideological thinking and dogmatistic thinking, because Matt Dillahunty happens to be wrong on this. Everybody knows philosophy knows he's wrong on it. I've never met a philosopher that doesn't say he's not wrong on this. Not one. Not one. I know a lot of philosophy people. If you are a philosopher and you disagree with me on this, by all means, come in and show me that I'm wrong. Or get a hold of me later and show me that I'm wrong. But I guarantee that in philosophy, you don't have two categories. And he's even said that before. So why is he trying to go back to, you only have atheists and theists? That's wrong. I had literally somebody today on Facebook says, oh, well, Steve, there's only theists and atheists. And he's not like saying, from my perspective, from my schema. He's saying that is it. There's no logical other possibilities, period. Like metaphysically speaking. And it's like, dude, you're so wrong. You've been indoctrinated to believe this, but it's wrong. It's just blatantly wrong. And they don't even believe their own eyes. And somebody had mentioned it before, cognitive dissonance. They have cognitive dissonance, I think, because their brain's saying to them, hey, this logic seems to work, but Matt Dillahunty has said, and Matt can't be wrong. No. And it's kind of like the brain melts them from shit like that. It's like they can't understand that, oh yeah, he is wrong on this, and this is why. You can visually see it. You can go through the logic as many times as you want. It's not going to change. But let me see if I can pull up my VIN. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to make this quite a bit larger here in a second. One sec. All right, can you guys see this? I guess I should have. Yeah. All right, so this particular diagram is my Venn diagram. This shows it quite clearly, right? And it's logically consistent, right? It's completely consistent with what I've just been doing. It shows that strong atheism is a subset of weak atheism, and that it implies the other, because all strong atheists must be logically weak atheists, right? Because if you believe there's no God, you don't believe there is one. And then you have the intersection in the middle, which is not B and not P, which is going to be agnostic. And it shows that the agnostic has both the conjuncts. So what happens when you have the bottom part? You have the not B, not P, and you have not BP. Those are called a conjunction. And when you eliminate one of the conjunctions by what's called conjunctive elimination or simplification, then you still have both disjuncts. So anybody that's the bottom is both the P or Q. P and Q. They're both P and they're Q. So you can eliminate one by simplification or conjunction elimination and say, okay, I'm an agnostic and I'm eliminating the not B, not P. Therefore, I'm left with not BP, weak atheism. Okay, yeah. But then you can do the same thing. So you can eliminate the not BP, get rid of weak atheism, and say I'm an agnostic. I'm assuming I'm agnostic, and I'm also a weak theist, not B and not P, right? Because you are both the conjuncts when it's a conjunction like that. So the weak atheist can't just be not BP. He has to be either B not P or not B not P. That's the problem. There's not a place you can rest a thing on and not be ambiguous. Because if you're not BP, you're either an atheist or agnostic. There's no other options. So it's very, very ambiguous. Yeah. 50 Shades says, Steve, I'm curious. When in Satan groups, people say they are Christian witches. Yeah, sure. I have no problem with that. What's wrong with being a Christian witch? If you want to believe in Christianity, you want to practice witchcraft, I don't see they're exclusive of each other. I don't know what Christ has to say about it, but I don't talk to the guy. I never met him. And I don't believe in witchcraft, so it doesn't matter. I don't believe in Satan either, but I do like satanic music. Ozian says, I had lots of people argue that saying that someone who does not believe in not God was a contradictory statement. Yeah, that's silly. That is a double negative. Yeah, that was Arn Ra. Arn Ra blocked me on that, Ozian, by saying that. And Arn Ra is completely freaking wrong on that. Why? Because the double negation doesn't affect the predication. The double negation is on the proposition, not the predication. Right? So when you have not B, not P, that's not a double negation. A double negation would be not B, not P. Or I guess if you run on the predication, it'd be not B, not P, right? And I know it sounds weird, but that's what it would be. So double negation is two negations in a row. Here, not B, not P is not a double negation. You have a predication prior to the negation. So what you're saying is, I do not believe P is false, is what you're saying. How is that a contradiction, right? How is it a contradiction? I do not believe it's false. Okay, well, there's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean I believe it's true, though. If you took a double negative of that, it doesn't mean you end up believing it's true, right? If I take a double negative of not B, not P, I end up with atheism. I end up with believe it's false, actually, right? But not B, not P is not a double negative. And I don't know why some atheists keep thinking that. It's completely clear. If I say, I do not believe P is false, if I took the double negative at that, where it's the opposite, that would have to mean I do believe that P is false, which would be atheism, like I said. So that's clearly not a double negative. It clearly cannot be. It's just somebody who's saying P is not. I don't believe it. I'm not accepting that P is false. So if I said, hey, God does not exist, and you say I don't believe you, right? Then that's not accepting that P is false, right? That's weak theism. Not B, not P. How is that a double negative to these people, Ozian? I mean, it just blows my mind, right? Because if you just think about it for a second, you'd be like, yeah, no possible way. Because if somebody says to me, God does not exist, meaning P is false, and I say I don't believe P is false, I'm not saying that P is true, right? There's no double negative there. You want to see us showing fallacies? Yeah, I can do that. You want informal fallacies, April? Like a show on fallacies people get wrong a lot, like ad populum, ad hominem, and argumentum ad verecundiam. Those are three fallacies that get so much misinformation when it comes to argumentum ad dictionarium, argumentum ad ignorantium, argumentum ad popularity, argumentum ad verecundium. These are so many different things that people get mistakes on. But what do you guys think about this so far? Let me transition that over. Do you guys agree, though, that this is basically a solid system right here? And it's not directly derivable from those two axioms because the axioms are prescriptive, right? If I just end up with those from the prescriptive axioms, I end up with just theism and atheism, right? I can derive. Well, I don't know what the top part would be. It leaves it out in the cold, right? The top part has no particular label. This is what Draper was actually saying. If I just kept with the axioms, right? And this is why I'm saying I think it's impossible to do with just the axioms without kind of going, oh no, I gotta change something here, because this goes away because this is not derivable from the axioms by the label. Because it's an implication. It's not a direct contradiction. So I don't think it's derivable from the initial conditions. Get rid of this too. And if we want to start over again, we're gonna try something. Try a different way if you want. Get rid of this. So, anyways, what do you guys think so far? I mean, do you guys think it's a challenge that any atheist can actually do? Because we know they're not going to try, right? We know that probably very few people are going to try this. Now, somebody wrote a blog on my paper the other day, and I already reviewed it. It's on my channel. I'll probably come up at the end of this video if you want to go to it, but it was very poorly done. Don't derive it. Label it God denier instead. Kimamaki, the modem Bailey is my bug up my ass. Informal fallacy. It used just as frequently as by atheists as theists. Yeah, no. Modem Bailey is commonly found as well. So she says, I think their issue with double negatives comes from the incorrect writing style advice that double negatives are any sentence that have two negatives and that these negatives cancel each other It's negatives, yeah, that cancel each other in normal sentences. Yeah, and you're right, and that wouldn't be the case. Now, there is some issues when it comes to what's called negation raising. I'm not going to get into the heuristics of it when it comes to negation raising. For as far as double negatives, it's going to be outside the scope of what I'm getting into right now. But there is something to be said by linguistics, that if you say I do not think that I'm not going to the party, it can be linguistically implied that you're not going to the party. So if I say I do not believe God exists, it's linguistically implied that I believe God does not exist. But that's called negation raising. It's a very specific thing in the English language, and I think few other languages. But that's not a logical implicature. But I'm just wondering if what an atheist thinks they're going to be able to do with this. I'm going to keep this down to an hour. I'm going to end this in 10 minutes because I want this to be easily digestible. So I'm not going to go through it again. I'm going to let you guys go through it. You can download these images from my Twitter account. Just go to my Twitter account, which is in the video description. You can find it there. Just look for Square of Opposition, search for that or whatever, and it's on my timeline. So if you want to play with it that way, or create your own, just it's not that hard. It's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, 6 lines. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. Yeah, 6 lines, and 2 of them are arrows. So, and there's broken lines. It's not that complicated to draw a square of opposition. But I think this really kind of does point out that Matt's usages are just not syntactically or semantically complete, so to speak. And I'm not trying to be super logical in those terms using it that way. But I mean, it just shows that there are more categories in theist and atheist, because if not, you end up with some really poor really poor uses, because you're just saying, hey, look, if atheism is not the belief that God, I do not believe God exists, then as Draper points out, what the hell is strong atheism? It doesn't exist at that point, right? Because it's propositional. You cannot get a proposition. You can't get a propositional set nested in a psychological set like that. She says, as an atheist, I tried, but there are no obvious mistakes. Yeah, I don't think there is either. I sat in the Discord the other day saying, hey, look, based on these 2 axioms, how do you label this stuff, right? And there's just no way from the label where the bottom left didn't become theism. No way. The bottom left is always going to end up as theism. Oops. Because starting with those two axioms, right? You're always going to end up with this being theism. And this is what I'm saying. If you allow weak atheism to be atheism, then you have to allow weak theism to be theism. You have to. Or you can just say, this doesn't exist. This label here, no, not even going to use it. It's just going to be the top part. Just going to be in the strong case, which is what it normally is. Because that makes sense. That just makes sense, because this is atheism up here, right? So the bottom here doesn't have any labels except for this one right here, which would be agnostic, right? So this is again, if you want BP to be you want this over here to be atheist, then this is what it ends up being. This naturally follows by the implications of those axioms, that if you allow atheism to be on this bottom side, if you want this to call this atheist by syntax or semantics, sorry, well, I guess it would be syntax, yeah. Then the left-hand side on the theist side has to be theist. It just follows from this. So that's why I say, okay, don't have that axiom. Get rid of both these axioms, because I think both these axioms are bullshit. I think they're both completely wrong, right? So if you get rid of both those axioms, oh man, I'm telling you, I'm definitely not using this again to do this. There you go. I keep covering up my P there. There we go. So just get rid of these completely. Get rid of that initial axiom number 1, right? So atheism is not does not believe God exists. There. Get rid of that. Get rid of the second axiom that non-theism equals atheism. They're not the same thing. They never have been the same thing. Matt Dillahunty, you are wrong. therefore, this is a coherent, syntactically and semantically correct square of opposition. That is what you find in the literature. So when somebody says that this is not how it is in the literature, they're wrong. Burgess-Jackson has the same schema. Dr. Demi has the same schema. Oppie has pointed out the same schema. So if you think that Dr. Demi, Dr. Jackson, and Dr. Oppie are all wrong, then you need to prove it with logic. That's my challenge to the atheist out there. So if you're an atheist that ever watches this, this is why Matt Dillahunty is wrong. This is why the logic the works the way it does to make this be logically complete, both syntactically and semantically. And when Matt says you only have two categories, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. Now, again, if he wants that for his own personal framework and makes shit up, he can do that. I'm not trying to be a prescriptivist. I'm not saying he cannot use the usages and the axiom he has. What I'm saying is by doing so, you see the problems that it leads into. You see how it by like semantic necessity, I guess you can say, and I don't want to use modally, but it seems to be, at least by semantic implicature, I should say, probably be a better wording, that if you start off with atheism in the weak case, you end up with weak theism. It just naturally falls. It falls out, of the system naturally by logical implications. So when people say, "Oh, well, I can have weak atheism," but what the hell is weak theism? Well, this is where it comes from. And by the way, I'm not the first person to discover the semantic things. Right? That was Graham Oppie that I first read that from, but I've never seen anybody use the square of opposition to demonstrate what I've been demonstrating, right? Burgess-Jackson and Demi uses the square of opposition, right? But they have not ever used it in a way that will show if you have weak atheism, it is also agnostic and weak theist that I've ever seen. I don't think they have. I mean, if you look at their diagrams, it doesn't get to that level. What this gets to is basically. Here's theism. If you're a theist, you're not an atheist, and you're not agnostic, right? In fact, if you want to see Dr. Demi's schema, which I've used, and this is how it actually is in the academic literature, then it will look like this. If I can bring it up for you. He uses a hex because it is more of a hex. But you've probably seen it before. This is a schema, right? This shows the logical relationships, right? In his paper, that if you're a theist, you cannot be an agnostic and you cannot be an atheist because there's only three categories. Which again, Matt Dillahunty is wrong. And he keeps on saying, "Oh, it's about knowledge." No. Now you're what's called equivocation fallacy and being dishonest. If you look at the visual on it, I'll show you the visual. It'll look like this. So if you want, so it's really not really a hex because it should be a square when you start throwing in the relationships. But the square works. Don't get me wrong, the square works. But if you really want to suss it out more specifically, you would have to use a hex, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But both systems work. I mean, his system and my system are exactly the same. But he doesn't get into weak atheism, weak theism, right? He doesn't explain how that actually is the same as agnostic. Oppie points out that if you have weak atheist, you actually have weak theism, right? But he doesn't go so far to prove that weak theism, and agnostic are logically the same position as I have. That's the difference. That's what I think I've added to the discussion. All right, what do we got here? Triumph says, we're trying to quantify religion with logical equations. No, I don't give a shit about religion. You are either the core elements or doesn't resonate with you. Simple as, this is my opinion, so don't get mad. Hypothetically, philosophy about things we can't be proved. Well, that's not true. We prove things all the time using philosophy. I just did. This whole video is about philosophy, using logic. Logic is philosophy. It's this flowery pseudo-intellectualism that accomplishes nothing but feed the ego of the person. Why is that? I mean, what would you have against logic? The square of opposition has been around since Aristotle. This is called an Aristotelian relationships. There's a reason why people now. There's some issues with Aristotelian logic later on down the line, but this doesn't really play into anything that I'm doing. I'm not even using categories, right? So I don't know why you would think that logic is not something that people should have. And also, if a person is putting out misinformation, right, then it should be corrected. It should be corrected, and that's what I'm doing. I'm showing you that by using logic, you can go objectively verify for yourself that Matt Dillahunty is wrong. The ACA is wrong. Okay. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. April says, I'm not any one of those things. I am two of those things, but I don't know how to translate your two of what things. Triumph says, probably didn't write that well. I mean, I trust logic rather than hypothetical, what if that's possible. Well, yeah, but hypotheticals are what we do all the time. Science is based upon hypotheticals. How do you think you do experimental testing, right? You assume the null is true, and then it's a hypothetical, right? And then you run the experiment. So we hypothesize things all the time. Hypotheticals are wonderful for coming to the conclusions of things, because we'll say, okay, what if? They're called subjunctive cases. So when dealing with counterfactuals, that's how we progress as a society to learn stuff. To say, okay, let's say hypothetically this happens. What will happen? We run simulation theory all the time. Monte Carlo simulations. We run all these different types of things. Those are all hypotheticals. April says for 10 Canadian, what about if I don't believe God exists and I believe gods don't exist? Those remember, one implies the other, right? Look at the square of opposition. If you believe there's no God on the top right side, then by subalternation, this line going down here, it implies you do not believe God exists. But the converse, this way doesn't hold. That's why this arrow only goes one way. It's not bidirectional. The subalternation means that believing God does not exist implies you do not believe God exists. But the contrary does not hold. The contrary doesn't hold. If you say, I do not believe God exists, it doesn't mean that you believe that God doesn't, but it is ambiguous because it doesn't tell you whether you believe that God doesn't exist or you're agnostic on it. This is where Matt keeps going wrong. Because he'll keep on telling people, if I say I don't believe, it doesn't mean that I'm saying that I believe it's false. Well, yeah, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right, but it's also saying that you're ambiguous, because what is your position then? Do you hold it false or are you agnostic on it? And he's trying to just say there's no position as agnostic. You're wrong, Matt, and you're lying to people. You're absolutely, at this point, lying to people. I don't know how else to put it. I'm going to call you as directly as I can. You, sir, are a liar. Because agnostic is, in the literature, is exactly as logically denotated as I have right now. The only difference is most time it uses BSG and, not BS, not G, and not BG. BSG, I'm sorry. That's the only difference. So it only throws in a subject indexical and it uses G as a proposition. Other than that, that's how it is in the literature. So to say that it doesn't exist, you're wrong. You're wrong. Because for him to say, oh, well, if you're at the bottom position, if you have no position either way, if you're a lack of belief atheist, so you're the bottom right, but you don't hold the top right. If you don't hold a strong atheism per se, right? You're just a weak atheism as by the first axiom, then it follows logically that you are also not B, not P. You cannot escape that. That is just logic. You cannot escape that. If you're this down here in the corner, you're either the top right or the bottom left. There are no other options. By the way, there's a proof for that. I have a logical proof for that on if you guys want to see it, I'll find it for you. But do you want to assume for now that that's the case, or you really want to see the proof for it? I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're not BP, then you're either a strong atheist or you're agnostic, or at least logically speaking. So he wants to call that position atheist, right? So this is the dishonest tactic that atheists will do. They'll say, oh, well, if there is this by axiom 1, you are an agnostic atheist. Wait, what? Or you're just an atheist, right? They'll just say, oh, if you just meet this one at the bottom, okay, you're an atheist. That's dishonest, because you're also a weak theist too. You also have this conjunction over here. You can't just get rid of it. You can't just toss it out because you don't like it. So you are this and this, which is defined in the literature descriptively as agnostic. The agnostic is somebody who doesn't have a position either way. It's no more closer to the atheist, as Oppie points out, and it's no more closer to theist, as Oppie points out. He's exactly right. So if the atheist wants to say, if you do not believe God exists, you're an atheist, the theist has every right to say, oh, if you do not believe God does not exist, you're a theist. It is the same argument. And if you don't allow for that, that is a fallacy for that. It's called special pleading. Because you're allowing for something for yourself that you do not allow for your opponent. That is special pleading by definition. Do you guys follow that? That's just why when Oppie says agnostic is no more closer to atheist than theism, see, it's not. It's right. It's both. It's both the way they're using it. But Matt Dillahunty and other atheists from the atheist experience lie. They absolutely lie and says, well, you just have the right side, therefore you're an atheist. But you also have the left. You also have the left, which makes you a theist as well. You can't just subsume atheism like that. That is dishonest. And everybody's been telling them that for how many years? How many years? People have been telling them that. But they don't seem to care. They just don't seem to care. I mean, it blows my mind that they're so willing to be dishonest. And of course, they'll never address this stuff. And if they do, they'll lie about it or get it wrong, obviously, right? Let me see if I can just toss this proof up here real quick. Then I'm going to call it. Because again, I really don't want to go longer than that. Why does it not let me move this? What's going on here? I don't know why it's not letting me move this, and I don't have it locked. I'm taking it out studio. Yeah, okay, that worked. All right. Yep, no, I don't need that. I saw an event come up, but I'm. So this is the proof right here that if you're a BP, if you're not BP, which is a weak atheist, and you don't have the strong, then you also are a weak atheist, a weak theist, which makes sense. Look at the first premise. If not BP and not B, not P, right? Not B, not P is this. Not B, not P. So then, therefore, if you're not PP and not B, not P, then you're not B, not P, right? I mean, it's simple, right? It sounds weird, but that's just simple. I'm not B, not P, therefore I'm not B, not P. So you can go through this and you can rewind the video and see that this follows that you eventually get to the conjunction of not BP and not B, not P, which is down here at the bottom. This is actually proving that all weak atheists are agnostics. And it's also proving that all weak atheists are theists, or weak theists as well. Right. Okay. Makes sense. And let me go back to the video here. See where we're at. Saw some super chats. One sec. Dan the Machine. Dan, Canadian 699. Hey, Dan the Machine says, is there a way to logically counter presuppositionalism, either theologically or materialism? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you remember back in the day when we were discussing how to have these discussions with presuppositionalists, for Pete's sake. I can't even talk. And it was myself and Floyd FP and Ozzy and other people, and we were kind of saying that, look, presuppositional argumentation is dishonest. And this is kind of how you avoid the pitfalls. But what I've noticed with certain presuppositionalists, like Darth Dawkins, he argues contradictions. Now, we all know if you have contradictions, you can prove anything. It's called the principle of explosion. So when he does that, and he has contradictions, you can never nail him to the wall. It's like nailing Jello to the wall. Why? Because he just picks the other side. If I say the sky is blue and the sky is not blue, and you say, hey, here's a problem here with your argument that sky is blue. Well, no, I'm arguing the sky is not blue. Well, here's a problem that your argument's against it being not blue. Well, no, I'm saying it's blue. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth on presuppositional argumentation. It's dishonest. J.R. Street says, B not P is a subset of B not BP. No, that's backwards. Strong is not. Oh, no, you're right. I'm sorry. Strong is a subset of weak. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, I'm sorry. But I see no distinction between not B, not P, and BP. I certainly don't see theists claiming not B, not P. Okay, so the difference here, the difference there, and let me go back to my image here. The top left portion of this square right here, right, is a person who says, I believe there are no gods, right? This is for J.R. Street. This is, I believe there are no gods. The person down here is saying, I do not believe gods do not exist. To be in this position here is one of two things. Either you are accepting there are no gods, or you're agnostic either way. You're up here, or down here. Just like if you're down here, you're either this or this. If you're down here, you're either this or this. So if I say I don't believe that God doesn't exist, I have two options. I can believe that because I believe there is a God and be a theist. So that implies this by this subalternation. Or I can say I'm undecided. I have no position either way. I don't believe that God doesn't exist, but I also believe that God does exist, which is going to be the agnostic down here. So this implies this, but this converse doesn't work that way. This does not imply that. That's the difference. April says for 10 Canadian, next show called A Fallacy a Day Keeps the Doctor Away. A short show where you teach a different fallacy each day. Do you want me? Well, I don't know. You know, those would be really short, but yeah, I guess I could. I mean, for you, as a huge supporter of this channel, I would be happy to do that for you. Actually, I'm actually honored. Yeah, absolutely. I will. I start that next week, maybe. I will get some thoughts together, and I will come up with fallacies, and I'll do real short videos just on those fallacies and the logical format of that fallacy and how that I find those fallacies are misused. Does that work for you? That'd be fun. I can do that. I really want those to be very short videos so people can digest them. I mean, it should be no more than like 10 or 15 minutes at most, right? I would imagine. So, Chemo, on-screen scrolling chat, yeah, drops. Isn't that reverse? I think the top left is theism. Yeah, the top left right here is theism, right? But if you're the bottom portion here, where you just say I do not believe there's not a God, I don't believe that no gods exist, then this only can be if you're one of two states, that you hold there are no gods, or you have no position either way. Everyone mixes up the definition for agnostic. No, I don't. I guarantee you I do not. Differentiate between I know there's something higher, but not one we know, and think there's a very low chance there's a God, but we don't know. No, you're very confused. Agnostic in the ontological domain of talking about God's existence, right? Agnosticism is a psychological state. It's not a propositional state. Agnosticism is the state of being agnostic on the proposition where you're undecided. So agnostic literally is this down at the bottom here. You have no belief either way. If you're at the bottom where you hold both these positions here, right? You have no position either way. You are both. Let me highlight this. This is the agnostic position right there, right? The agnostic doesn't have a belief either way. Let me see if I can do that better. There we go. The agnostic doesn't have a belief either way, right? That has nothing to do with knowledge. There's no knowledge predication there. And the proposition is not asking you anything about knowing if God exists or about the knowability of gods. And by the way, Gnostic doesn't even mean knowledge. That's a misconception. Never meant knowledge. What it meant was a specific type of knowledge that was hidden knowledge or divine knowledge. Okay, so when you're talking about gnosis, meaning knowledge, it didn't mean epistemological knowledge. That's never what it referred to. It didn't mean even JTB or anything like that. What it meant was a specific type of information, a specific type of explicit knowledge of the gods that allowed you to become one with the gods. You obtained gnosis with them. This was gnosticism or Gnosticism. So when people say Gnostic just means belief, they're not really understanding what that word originally was used for. If you want to use Gnostic as an adjective, as a modifier for some weird multi-axial schema using agnostic and atheist and agnostic and atheist, you can go ahead and try. I've shown many times it doesn't work very well at all, really. But if you want to do it and see if you can make a logical schema that works, I'll take a look at it. I've never seen anybody able to do it, though. So yes, I'm not mixing up the definition of agnostic. Agnostic is what's in this red portion right here. That's cited by Dr. Demi, Dr. Jackson, Dr. Oppie, Dr. McCormick, I think maybe he has something on that, if I'm not mistaken. Drange talks about that. Even Russell, I think, even talks about it. But this is ubiquitous. When you're talking about God's existence and you say on the proposition, I'm undecided, that is known as agnostic, period. That's just how it is in philosophy. And anybody says otherwise, I dare you to go find me. That's incorrect. All right. Oh, Dan the Machine likes the fallacy shows? Yeah, it's a good idea. Well, she's smart. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up, guys. Again, if you got last minute questions, I've already gone 15 minutes over than I wanted. I mean, I enjoy talking to you guys, but I want this kind of people can go and kind of listen to this and go, okay, I see what Steve's trying to get at. Let's see if I can make this happen. I don't think anybody will. I don't think any atheist is going to take me up on this challenge. I don't. And if they do, I don't think they really can make it work. But I'm willing to entertain. If you can make it work, message me. Yeah, leave comments in the video description. I'll link somewhere where I can like go look at it if you have an image. Yeah. Wuchu says, what is the start of all that exists? Who knows? Yeah. If I had that answer, then I would probably be a really well-off person in the philosophical community, right? I'd be well known if I knew all that. I mean, I would probably say that quantum fluctuations are at least necessary beings. If you're gonna say anything's necessary, then that would probably be quantum fluctuations. But even then, I can't make that claim because it's so many variables about if that is a metaphysical necessity or not. So. Momo Jack, I just wrote a comment. I don't think my comments are showing up for some reason. Well, they are showing up. It may not be showing up on this feed. I don't know. That could be a problem with Streamlabs. But you are showing up in my live chat, so when it does upload, Momo Jack, it will show up. Okay. All right, like I said, I'm gonna end this. I'm gonna enjoy the rest of my Sunday. I hope you guys do the same. To guys let you know, on Thursday I have James Friedman coming on to talk about First Amendment auditing and police overstepping their boundaries on the Non Sequitur Show. So if you like to go watch that, go subscribe to the Non Sequitur Show. And then if you got any more ideas for things of this channel, by all means, leave me comments. I'd love to do that stuff. I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't always show Momo Jack, but they are showing. It's just probably a glitch. Yeah. But let me leave you guys with this real quick. Let me just do a vote, I guess. Let me do a vote. Then we're going to end this. Vote. Will atheists meet this challenge? Not if they're going to take it. Well, they have to take it to meet it, but what do you guys think? Let me ask you guys. Vote on top there. Do you think that any atheist will actually even try this challenge? I did have them do it in Discord, on the ACA Discord. No, none of them can make this invalid. None of them can show how it would work just with those axioms prescriptively. It couldn't, because you always end up with atheism in the top right, which is not allowed by your axiom. If you're going to prescriptively define atheism as the position that you do not believe God exists, and that you cannot then have strong atheism, leads it down the rain, as Draper astutely notes. But because that infers you do not believe, it has to be labeled that. And so I don't see any atheist going, well, yeah, if you believe there's no God, you're not an atheist. What? But you cannot derive that label. You cannot derive that label from the axioms on the upper right hand side. You can't derive it. You can't. Why? Because it's implicature. It's a subalternation implicature, right? I mean, you might. Okay, well, let me. You know what? I'm gonna throw this out. You might be able to derive it from the contrary. Yeah, I'm gonna take that back. You could derive it from the contrary. Now that I look at that, because the contrary would be theism and atheism. Since remember the contrary was the position of both of them can be false, but both can't be true. But one can be true, the other could be false. And I don't mean by theism meaning God exists. Okay, remember on the square of opposition, this is not saying theism is true. This is saying you're holding that position, right? It doesn't matter whether the God exists or not. This is talking about beliefs. So the person who believes, this is why you add that indexical, that S, to represent there's a person believing this. There's a subject, right? That's why I use that terminology. One of the reasons I did. So on the contrary, on the top part, you cannot be somebody who both believes and believes it's false, right? And to be an rational agent. This is assuming rationality, right? Obviously, you can hold both positions if you are in a state of irrationality, right? But we're going to assume rationality. So if you do not hold the top left and you do not hold the top right, then you hold the bottom two, which is agnostic. So you know what? I'm going to take that back. You can derive atheism from the contrary, okay? But it still seems to violate axiom 1, because if you're going to define atheism in the weak case, it still has to apply to the strong. It still has to. I mean, you're not going to call somebody who believes there's no God, somebody who's not an atheist. So. All right, now I'm definitely going to wrap it up. I love you guys. I appreciate everything. April, especially. Very, very, very appreciative of your super chats. One more thing. Atheism is religion is my favorite religion since all. Atheism is not a religion. Atheism cannot be a religion. However, atheism does have dogma. Just like biology has dogma. The central dogma as biology is DNA to RNA to translation, right? So that word dogma doesn't mean evil things. It has nothing to do with religiosity, right? But subject matters do have dogmas. Like I said, that's why it's called the central dogma of biology. So atheism can be construed as the dogma that God does not exist. And atheism could be a system. It could be a belief system because a system can't have one element. I just think it's trivial, right? It's a trivial case to say atheism is a belief system. Okay, sure. If you have a system that has one element, which is possible, then sure, it's a belief system. Does it get you anywhere? No. No, it's trivial. All beliefs, and then you can make any belief. Any belief you have is a system, right? I believe X equals X. Okay, that's my belief system. Sure, trivially speaking, it's a trivial case. All beliefs are a belief system in the trivial case because if you allow for a system to have one element, which you can in mathematics, absolutely. But it's not a religion. There are atheist religions, though, right? At best, your challenge will gain you many proofreaders, but no defeaters. Probably. People might look at it, but yeah, I don't seriously think anybody's going to try to actually take this challenge. But I'm going to leave it out there. It's the Atheist Square of Opposition Challenge. Okay? Kiyomaki, always a pleasure. Like I said, please let me know in the comments what you think. Rutu says, not believe, not God, believes God. That is absolutely false. That is not a double negation. Yes, this is what we tried to explain earlier. You want to go back and review it, but that is not a double negation. A double negation would only be on either the predication or the proposition, not both. It doesn't distribute like that in logic. What you're doing is called a false distribution. Because if I say God exists and if I say God does not exist and you say I don't believe God does not exist, you're saying I don't believe it's false. Right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you believe it's true. You can have no position either way. So your double negation there believes God exists. It has got to be wrong. Right? Because this right here does not imply theism. This right here implies either atheism strong or agnostic. And if you're not this, if you're not this position, right? Then you're either this position or this position. Well, no, actually, if you're not this, you're this position. This would be the negation, right? And the negation of not B, not P is just B, not P. It doesn't distribute. Because what's the here? I can show you it this way. Would you see that up here? Oh, can you guys see the mouse? I don't know if it's showing the mouse. Can you guys see the mouse? Yeah, here's a pencil. See this position here, B, not P? Woo? What's the negation of that? The negation of this right here is not B, not P, which is this. Then double negation of this has to resort back to this. It can't get you to this. If this is negated, you get this. If you double negate this, you have to get back what you originally had. You're moving up to here. Clearly what you said is wrong. Right? Rutu? So do you agree that what you said, that your double negation is wrong? So I'm going to show it to you one more time. If you have this position here and you negate it, you get this. Just like if you have this position and negate it, you get this. The negate goes on. You're negating think of these parentheses here. You're negating this entire group right here. If you had parentheses here, you'd end up with this. Okay? So this is one group. You're just negating, you're like, this is the group of people that believe God does not exist. I'm not in that group. I'm in the group that of people that do not believe that God does not exist. So you're in the negation of it. So if you have the negation of this and gives you this, the double negation has to resort back to here. It does not give you this. Therefore, this is what you said about does not believe, does not exist equals believes exist is completely wrong. Yeah. Do you agree with that, Rutu? Does that make sense? Do you accept the correction? I'll give him a second to keep up. Does everybody else that make sense? I know it does for Kimomaki because he explained it to other people before. You know. Playmo says, this is why the phrase God denier is the correct way to describe B, not P. A double negation of B, not P should look like not B, P, which is just B, not P. Right. Right. Right, exactly, Soshi. So, I mean, you could prove it this way, right? Because this is a group. So you can go this, right? And then you can, what's a good symbol for this? I'll just do it, dot, dot, dot. Then I can take the negation of this, dot, 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 which gives me this, right? Oh, that's correct, right? That's all mathematically correct? So if I take the double negation, or the negation of this, right, it doesn't distribute, and you just get, because you have to end up with what you started with. So, April, thank you, Steve / Steve McCrae. Love you, dude, and I appreciate it. I love you guys as well, April. You've just been so supportive, and it means a lot. It really, honest to God, does. That may or not exist. It means a lot. God to the what did I say? God. It means a lot, yes. And then what did I say after that? Swear to God, yeah. Swear to God that may or may not exist. There you go. I was like, what was I talking about? Shit. So, all right. So I've proven to you that your logical negation is wrong there, Wutu. Don't worry, you're not the only person that has made that error. Arn Ra has made that error big time, and when I tried to correct it on it, he broke. He broke his mind, and he blocked me on Facebook after that. Yeah. And other people try and tell, hey, Arn, you're wrong. That's not a double negation. And yet, you know, the people that are telling him he was wrong also know a little bit of basic logic. This is what I'm saying, that new atheism is just as dogmatic, just as fundamental as any religion and any religiosity I've ever seen. The new atheist TM that are over at the Atheist Experience are just as indoctrinated and just as Pavlovian and just as knee-jerk reaction and just as dogmatic and just as evangelistic and infuriatingly wrong as any fundamental Christian I've ever seen in my life. I see literally no difference. And just as dishonest. Willfully so. They don't care about philosophy. They don't care about logic. What they care about is converting the person to their belief system. And they'll do it by any means possible. An American Atheist has specifically basically told me that when I had Pam Whistler, who was the editor-in-chief on. She basically said, we are not a philosophy group. We are a political group. We're there to get people to subscribe to us, to give us money. We don't give a shit about what the definition of atheism, we don't give a shit about the logic, we don't give a shit if it's right or wrong, so as long as basically people subscribe or become members of American Atheist. I cannot accept anything like that. Right? I cannot. So I find that American Atheist and Matt Dillahunty and all those people over the ACA are absolutely as dishonest as any fundamental Christian. And I'm so glad that many people have gotten away from them. I know Eric Murphy and V and other people have distanced themselves quite a bit from the ACA. I know that Notes from Autumn has. I know that even what's her name? Jen, Beck. I can't remember her name. But more people are distancing themselves because they are a dishonest organization. Momo says, would you agree to a formal debate with Dillahunty about this topic? No, I will never, ever speak to Dillahunty until he apologizes to me. If he apologizes to me, for one, saying I've been wrong all this time, but two, more importantly, Dillahunty has to apologize to me and every one of my subscribers for supporting my former business partner who stole $60,000 of their money and then supported him and said that the entire case was based upon, or hinge upon the testimony of a drunk ex-boyfriend, meaning my former business partner's ex-boyfriend, who ended up beating up and getting arrested for domestic violence, and saying that this guy was lying and that my partner was telling him the truth, and it was all basically coming down to his beat-up boyfriend or my former business partner. Matt needs to apologize to the community on that because he took the wrong side on that. As people know, my former business partner was found liable for fraud, fraudulent conversion, unfair and deceptive trade practices, breach of fiduciary duty, and breach of contract, and 2 counts of criminal contempt, 1 count of civil criminal contempt, and he beat up his boyfriend, which I have in a video on CCTV on this channel. And Matt Dillahunty never once apologized for any of that. Never once apologized saying, oh man, Steve, I got that one wrong. I'm sorry that your partner stole all the money and tried to steal the channel and screw over all the people that were supporting the channel. I'm sorry that happened. I didn't mean to insult his former boyfriend who was beat up by him, calling him calling him a drunk ex. So no, I will never, ever speak to Matt Dillahunty until he apologizes. After that, then you bet your ass I would, but he will never do it. Who says, I still hold my position. Why? Because I reviewed my logic lessons of the subject and it holds. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I guarantee it doesn't. I just literally showed you. What is the negation of this? What's the negation of that? It is this. What's the double negation of this? There you go. You're wrong. It's as simple as that. Absolutely wrong. So you can believe whatever you want, but I guarantee you, if you go ask a person who knows logic as well, they're going to tell you that you're wrong on it. So anyway, 6:30. I'm wrapping this up. It's been 90 minutes. Peace out, guys. Love you. Look forward to your comments. Like, subscribe, share this video, put it everywhere out there. Tag Atheist on it. Say, hey, Atheist. Here's a challenge for you. You guys like puzzles. You guys like, being smart and things of that nature. Let's see what you can do. Let's see what you come up with. Okay. So with that, guys, I bid you adieu, and I'll be seeing you probably on Wednesday. I think I got some things scheduled, and then of course on the 9th, I've got the Non Sequitur show with James Friedman, and I will bid you guys adieu. Good night.